result on economic growth. And of course, China, very well positioned in trust, not positioned enough on the skills to implement that trust. Let me now go over 4 negotiation tactics that hurt the ability to gain innovation and value. The most common statement in all of negotiation is, if you don't do X, I'm going to do Y. It's a threat. And has all these problems. They won't do it. They'll fight back. It destroys relationships. And so yet people use threats all the time. I'm sure you've all said to people, if you don't do X, I'm going to do Y. It doesn't work. That doesn't mean you can't give people reality testing, but you have to do it differently. And I'd like to use an around-the-house example. I have a son, Alexander. When he was younger, much younger, he wouldn't clean his room. And I would say things to him like, Alexander, if you don't clean your room, you won't get Legos on Saturday. And when I said that, he would not clean his room no matter what I said or did. So eventually, in developing this model, I figured out something different. I said to him, Alexander, there's nothing better that I want to do for you on Saturday than buy you Legos. Why, I buy Legos for boys with clean rooms. Are you such a boy? Clean this room. I frequent banks with good interest rates. Are you such a bank? It's exactly the same threat, but it's collaborative, it's forward-looking, and it's positive. So I've made it a common problem. Instead of, I can beat you up or I can hurt you in your profits, how do we both do this better? Making this a common problem is a way to look at this. So that's the first one. Help me help you instead of threats. Next is deadlines. People think, let's have some creative competition. Let's have some deadlines. It's an old wives' tale. It doesn't work. All these things happen when there are deadlines. Less information processing, worse deals, no deals at all. So how do you get yourself more effective time? Number 1, less conflict, more effective time. Number 2, start with the easy things. When I manage a meeting, I don't go right to the deal. I start with the easy things, like, when's the next meeting? When's lunch? Where's the next meeting? Should we agree on an agenda? And by the time I do 4 or 5 of those things, people have agreed to 4 or 5 things, small for sure, but it gets people in the mood to start agreeing with things like eventually what's the split of the stock. Third, invoking competition, which is what I call best alternative to a negotiated agreement. This is saying to people, I have other offers, constantly looking around. This was invented by the Harvard Negotiation Project at Harvard Law School around 1975 with the publication of Getting to Yes, and is the most commonly used negotiation tool in the world. I have other offers. I should say that I was associate director of the Harvard Negotiation Project. I ran its outside consulting firm. I sold this model for years, and I know it backwards and forwards, and it needs to go away. Because, number 1, it uses power and leverage. Number 2, it's an implicit threat with all the problems that I just mentioned. And if you don't think that's the case, the next time you go out to dinner with your favorite person or spouse or friend, halfway through dinner, look through your little black book and say to them, if I don't have a good time tonight, I've got alternatives. See what happens. People don't like that. It also doesn't give you the chance to get a lot of relationships because you're too busy looking around. Now, you might say, well, gee, I use this. I bought a car, and I threatened the dealer to go somewhere else, and the dealer said, okay. I didn't say it didn't work. I just said it's not good enough. Some years ago, I leased a BMW. I said to the dealer, I'm afraid I might overpay. I don't know your costs. He said, how do I get you to trust me? I said, well, show me all your numbers. Let's go to your computer. I'll give you a nice commission. You give me a nice discount. He said, fine. Went to his computer, looked up the numbers. I gave him a nice commission. He gave me a nice discount. And since then, I've been his new best friend. I take my car in for servicing. I get free washing all the time. I get free waxing worth $300 half the time. I get any loaner car I want on the lot. I get every discount known to man. And 2 years after that, he called me up out of the blue and said, you've got a 2-year-old car. We've got a couple of brand new BMWs on the lot. Why don't you come swap your car out, and we'll give you a new one, and we'll charge you 10% less. This deal was all right. Mine was better. And over a lifetime, that delta, that difference, deal after deal, is considerable. Anybody know here what the value of a single new car customer in their 20s is worth to a car dealership over their lifetime in terms of purchases, referrals, sales, and services? It's about $500,000. So when I go into a car dealership and they want to be transactional with me and try to charge me a higher price, I say, look at me. I'm your $500,000 customer. Are you interested? I want to make this a longer-term relationship. And if you're not interested, who else in your dealership wants my business for the next 20 years? Just a way to frame things to capture people's imagination. The last one of the poor tools to use is making yourself the issue. This tank has no power in the Middle East. It's not running over this little boy with the whole world watching. So if you make yourself the issue, you lose. About 15 years ago, I gave a speech in Washington State to the 400 senior lawyers and business people of Microsoft. And I began my speech by saying, this morning I looked up Microsoft on Google. And I typed in, Europe hates Microsoft. And I said, why did I get 5 million hits in a tenth of a second? I said, you think it matters? People don't buy your products, even if better, because they hate you? I said, you think it matters? You're on the government's radar screen because they think you're arrogant? I want to make myself nice and small and humble. They say, you have all this power. I say, no, I don't. I'm just Stu. I'm just a guy trying to make a deal. Somebody says, it's just business. One of the big lies in all of human interaction. Everything is personal. In my view, the statement, it's just business, is an excuse to mistreat people. So I want to make this personal. What's going on is my favorite opening in a negotiation. The next one is assuming that negotiations are rational. Logic is the big lie in negotiations also. All negotiations are emotional, even if people are calm outside. If I feel mad about yesterday, I don't care at all about your logical arguments. Here are the studies. Let's look at the first paragraph. End of the first paragraph. High stakes. Every negotiation worth doing is high stakes to the parties. World peace, $1 billion deal, my kid wants an ice cream cone. So every negotiation in the world begins emotionally with these results. Second paragraph, listening problems, judgment problems, and goal problems. When people feel emotional, they physiologically hear less. So when you start trying to be logical with someone who's emotional, your words are literally falling on deaf ears because they don't hear you. And part of the big problems in today's world is people don't fix that first. Look at the U.S.-China trade dispute. Would you say there's a lot of emotion there? Look at husbands and wives, kids and parents, business partners. Nothing useful is getting done because people get distracted. It's a normal human response, and we have to spend our lives trying to overcome that. Do you have a question, or are you just stretching? Okay. What do you do about this? Well, the first thing you do is you make emotional payments. Apology, concessions, I understand. It gets people to calm down. About 7 years ago now, I had a student from South America in my class at Wharton, a Latino student, who was stopped by a white cop in the middle of Philadelphia for going through a stop sign. Big ticket, $400 ticket. The cop came over and started saying all these racist, illegal things like, you Latinos, you don't belong here, you take our jobs, why don't you go back where you came from? And the student thought, I could sue him, I could report him, but then she thought, what's my goal? Which is not to pay a ticket the size of my monthly rent. So she said to the policeman, not sure right, but what you're saying is very important. People should not be here illegally and take our jobs. I'm here on a student visa. I respect this country's laws. Can you forgive me for this one mistake? And the policeman said, sure. That is available to you if you decide to make emotional payments. What if a billion conversations were different? Now, you might have to discuss emotional payments. I once did something my wife didn't like. I forget what it was. The next day, I bought her a dozen red roses, and I handed her the roses, and she took one look at the roses, and she said, that's not a big enough emotional payment. So maybe you'll have to discuss that a little bit. Okay, how about your own emotions? If you're emotional, you're no good to anybody, including yourself. And so a good example is you want surgeons who are empathetic and dispassionate, not empathetic and emotional. So how do you calm yourself down? Well, the first two are kind of obvious. You take a break, you get another negotiator. The last two are more interesting. Since dashed expectations cause emotion, if you lower your expectations about how people are going to treat you, you will never be disappointed, and you'll often be pleasantly surprised, but you won't be emotional. The last one is most interesting. Don't take it personally. So they insulted you. So they called you a jerk. Maybe it's not about you. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they're having a bad life. You're all having a good life. Most of the people in the world are having a bad life. Give them a break. Commiserate with them. They'll pay you back 100-fold. There is this cultural, I guess it is, genre in Asia about saving face. I want to save my face. If you take my face, I'm angry. I must tell you that from a negotiation point of view, that is a weakness because you get emotional and you lose focus on your goals. Don't let people do that to you. I had lunch with the Chinese consul in New York, after President Trump was elected, and he said, "What do I do with Donald Trump?" And I said, "Don't take the bait." Somebody tries to cause you to lose your face, what you should say is, "Good try." Don't take the bait. And I believe that the Chinese government is getting better at this now. I think from their actions that instead of taking the bait, they have in reserve 75 tweets to answer Donald Trump. Again, not getting emotional, not taking the bait. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about here, let me see if I can find it, is some problems involving emotion. Okay, so the reason that the person is emotional is because they worked hard for years on their product and they feel the intensity of their effort. So instead of saying your product is worth less, congratulate them on working so hard to achieve a good product. It calms them down and gets them to listen to you more. Second one, boss is emotional, blames me. It's not about you. Ask the boss how you can help. Number 3, I paid full price for my house and it still bothers me. Forget about it. It's over. Go on to the next negotiation. We improved the process and the boss who put in the process would not approve our improvement. That's because you devalued the boss by not consulting him on his own process. 5th, my wife blames me for a bad vacation to Disney World. So what? Apologize. Move on to the next vacation. It costs you nothing. Don't argue over who's right. It just wastes time. Now let's get to the centerpiece of the model. I guess we're not having this here. Here we go. Which is that people are everything. So not enough focus on people. You are the least important person in the negotiation. Most important person is them, followed by third party. So not to your boss, I deserve a raise, but how do I meet your needs so much I deserve a raise? It has to start with them. When you come into a negotiation and say, here's my proposal, that's bad negotiating. The right thing to say is, what's your proposal? Or even better, what's going on? Here are some examples that I'd like to give you. About 7 or 8 years ago in the United States, near Philadelphia in the Northeast, where I live, we had a big hurricane called Hurricane Sandy. Not dissimilar from storms you have where flights were delayed for days. My students all got on the very next flight out, usually upgraded to first class. Because everybody else said to the agents at the airport, I have to have a seat on the plane. My students all said to the agents, has your family. They made a human connection. When you make a human connection with somebody, they're almost 6 times more likely to give you what you want, 90% versus 16%. Were the agents manipulated? The ones we asked didn't think so. They said, finally somebody cares about me. So when you go into a store and you want a discount, don't ask for a discount. Say to the person behind the counter, I like your shirt. Nice tie. Shoes look nice. And you know what? They won't feel manipulated. They will go home to their family at dinner that evening and they will say, finally today, one customer was nice to me. Next one, Google fiber optics. I do a lot of work with Google, as you probably gathered. About 4 years ago, one of the 25 trainers I trained at Google, a guy named Brian Quigley, went to try to double Google's fiber optic capacity in one of its U.S. offices. The first part 2 years before had cost $6 million, and the vendor wanted to double it. Wanted another $6 million, doubling it to double the capacity. Instead of asking for a discount as a repeat customer, Brian decided to make a human connection. So he said to the vendor's representative, "What can I do for you?" And the vendor said, "Well, you can write me a letter of reference on Google Stationery, help me build my business." Brian said, "I could do that." And then he said to the vendor, "What could you do for me?" And the vendor decided to give Google a discount off of the $6 million in return for the letter of reference. Anybody know what that discount was? What Google paid for the $6 million installation was $6,000, a 99.9% discount. You don't find that out unless you make the connection, and that's not the only time that's happened at Google. Next one, Caribbean vacation, just like I suppose a vacation in Hainan or wherever else you go on vacation. Loud band. Complainer is told he should have expected it. Commiserator, 15 minutes later, is given an upgrade to a suite immediately on the other side of the hotel. Human connection. I had a student in my class from India, Mehul Trivedi, at Wharton, rejected 18 times for jobs. I made him rewrite his resume 18 different ways, one for each individual who had rejected him. And he ended up with 12 straight offers from the same people who had rejected him. How do I write a resume, you say? Depends on who it is that you can make the connection with. Okay, let's go a little farther here. Can you make a connection with somebody else? As I said, my most common comment is, what's going on? Is there a connection you can make on your family? A connection you can make on sports? We persuaded 3,000 farmers in the jungles of Bolivia to stop growing coca for cocaine and to start growing bananas. When I convinced each successive group, one at a time, to work with us. And what I said was to them, and I was dressed just like I am now, and they were dressed in rags practically, I said, "We seem really different from each other, but I bet we want a better life for our children." It took 10 seconds to make the connection. That's what you want to think about. How about men and women? How different are men and women in negotiation? Not different. Most of this stuff is made up. There's no biological basis for men and women to be different. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, women don't cry. It's all garbage. There are investment bankers in New York who are much tougher than men, some of whom stay home and take care of the children. It's all made up. It's just a bunch of tools that you can use whether you are a man or a woman. And so why is it that there's still not gender equality, despite successes, after 100 years of laws, lawsuits, marches, etc.? And that's because bias occurs on an individual basis and has to be solved on an individual basis. Your ability to achieve gender equality has much more to do with how you deal with the other person. Do you make personal connections? Are you focused on your goals? Do you not use threats? Do you make this a common problem? Do you use these tools? So let me talk now about not meeting our goals. So goals are where we start. Negotiation is about meeting your goals. And most people know this, let's meet our goals, but that is not really the right question. Let me show you now one of the main unasked questions in the history of the human race. Are our actions meeting our goals? This is the unasked question. People get distracted, they get emotional, and they don't realize that they're not meeting their goals. You see this all around the world. Are the U.S. and China meeting their goals right now? I don't think so. Making it a common problem, here's a simple example off the top of my head. The U.S. and China have what? 1.2 billion, 500. They have about 25% or maybe 20% of the world's population. Why don't they build factories together and sell the products to the rest of the world? People get emotional, they lose sight of their goals. You go into a store and you say to the sales representative there, unless you match the price that I can buy this TV for on the internet, I'm buying it from the internet. It's a threat. How will they feel? Go away. You're threatening my job. What if you instead said, you know what? I love you guys. I shop here a lot. I've got this problem. This TV is cheaper on the internet. I really want to buy it here. What should we do? And they'll often give you their own 20% employee discount, free warranty, or free servicing. The second way was much better than the first way because you made it a common problem. Should I hit the kid at home? Every major study in the last 50 years shows that parents who regularly hit their kids reduce their kids' IQ. More than half of all parents in the world regularly hit their kids. It's probably a good bet that parents don't say to themselves, you know what, my kid is too smart, I think I'll slap him around some more. So they don't realize they're not meeting their goals. So any time you see a parent hitting their kids, they're reducing their kid's intelligence. They're giving the kid a bad example. There are other ways to do it. Make it a common problem. Help me buy you Legos. Should I demonize or blame the other party? Usually for yesterday. Yesterday adds no value. Can't fix it, can't change it. Tomorrow adds value. Anytime I see somebody blaming somebody over yesterday, I know they are useless for adding value. The question is, what do we do now? That's the right question for negotiation, because the future is all that we can control. Have I picked the right negotiator? Very interesting, goal-directed question. The right negotiator is not necessarily the smartest, most senior, and most technically skilled. It's the person who can make a human connection with the other side. It may be the most junior and least qualified person on your team who happen to have gone to the same school as somebody on the other side. They make the connection, and then they introduce the rest of the team. In China and the U.S. and elsewhere, the senior person usually does the negotiation. Studies have shown that the more power you have, the more senior you are, the less you use personal tools. Of course, you don't have to. And so the best negotiators are actually the more junior persons on the team. Another one of those counterintuitive tools discovered from my research. Given all that, who's this? You may know this is Dennis Rodman, former basketball player for the Chicago Bulls. And the question is, what role should he have played in North Korea? Well, he made a human connection with the president of North Korea. And over the last 12 years, this connection was squandered because he was never asked by anybody to negotiate with the president of North Korea. What a lost opportunity. In 2002, 12 U.S. soldiers, special operations, beat back the Taliban, and there was a movie made about them called 12 Strong. These are the guys. These are the guys with Karzai, later president of Afghanistan. The leadership of Afghanistan has not incorporated the stability treaty with the West, and none of these guys, practically Karzai's blood brothers, has ever been called upon to talk to him. So your choice of negotiator, very important in whether or not you reach a deal. Some problems involving goals. Okay, couldn't convince a colleague that my solution to the problem was better and more sustainable. The word that doesn't belong here is better. Who cares if it's better? Which one meets our goals? I tell doctors when someone comes into the hospital emergency room bleeding from the arm and you can't find a sterile tourniquet, you wrap somebody's stocking around their arm. Which one meets our goals? Don't get into an argument about whose is better. Third. I want to persuade colleagues to change development direction, need resources to complete a specific project, none available. Well, what's the company's goal, and how can you better meet your goals? I want to wrap my proposal in the mantle of the goals of the most important constituency. Board director members, C-level people, customers, government officials who regulate. So wrap your suggestion in their interests. In Silicon Valley in the U.S., a lot of the U.S. companies, they have buses that take people from San Francisco, where most of the workers live, down the Silicon Valley in the morning and bring them back in the evening. A lot of traffic on the highway. It takes 2 hours in each direction. Well, they have internet on the bus. It's not very efficient, and a lot of people would like to work home a couple days a week. So, and the people I trained at those companies, we basically got them to say to their bosses, I can ride the bus every day, but you need to see me every day, and wouldn't I be more efficient working at home? And the management started letting some of them work at home. Okay, number 2, very interesting one. I couldn't convince an additional member of the team that looks after my daughter and the other kindergarten children, still unresolved. You have to ask the question why until you can't ask it anymore, and then you'll find the real problem. This probably has nothing to do with security and care for the children, which it looks like the parent is after here, and more. I say more team members, which is what the parent's after here. And yet, school boards and parents will argue over this for weeks. You could imagine a scenario where the school board member says, "Why do you want more team members?" Well, security. Why? Doors open. Why? Locks broken. Why? Carpenter's on vacation. Maybe this is a carpenter vacation problem. People don't ask the question why enough. In the United States, white cops will kill young black men until the end of time, until people start asking why, which has a lot to do with training, not insufficient training, and failure to deal with understand other people's perceptions. So whatever problem you have in China, you need to ask why until you can't ask it anymore and deal with actually the real problem. Next slide. We get to perceptions. And perceptions, of course, is where you start. I put up a red dot, and I say to people, what do you see? And I get all kinds of answers from red dot to orange circle to streptococcus. What does that mean? It means even with the simplest ideas, there's one, a great deal of scatter in what people see, and second, people don't see the whole picture. The right answer down at the bottom right is white space. There's more white or black space. This says white space, usually a white background. And clearly, only 3% of people give the right answer. A lot more white or black space than red dot. So this is important. As a check on this, I have put common words up on the screen and asked people to write down the first thing that comes to mind. And my favorite is the word woman, where I get lover, complaining, wife, litigation. I get all kinds of things here. 1/3 of the people, men and women, write down the word man, defining something by its opposite. So you're at your company, and somebody says, we have to have some more women on this team, and 1/3 of the people actually hear, we have to have some more men. What do you do about that? Well, you have to realize that when stakes are high, virtually all the time, they do not hear what you say. Try an experiment. Go into your favorite coffee shop when it's busy and not busy, or your favorite tea shop. See how many more mistakes they make when it's busy and not busy. They don't hear the end of your sentences. It's a little distracting for me when a lot of people are taking pictures. You will get the key slides at the end of this. In the Army, they have a saying, they tell you what you're going to do, they tell you what you're doing, they tell you what you did.